Welcome to Groups This Week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. We believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. During this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together. Well, hello and welcome, community groups. We're in a new setting today, in front of the new bookstore. David, you want to tell us a bit about this?
Well, thanks, I will. The bookshop opened up a couple weeks ago, and we are stocking it with some great titles. And so come on by. We have a number of volunteers that are bibliophiles. They love their books, and so they would be happy to introduce you to some really good reading. And it's open every weekend, so come to the bookshop. There we go.
Amazing. And if you're looking for the prices, they're on the back of the books, I learned.
Yes, they are, yes. Well, I mean, it can only be in so many places, right?
Well, we're almost concluding our First John series here. In our second to last passage this past weekend, you spoke at Real City in the evening service. I took the morning services at Mariner. And we were looking at 1 John 5, 1 to 12, and you kind of focus more on verses 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think like kind of diving into this passage, we see in those first few verses that there's like a call to obedience. And we've seen this like pop up throughout John's letter. And we just see that obedience is connected to like our love for God. And so my question, David, is like, how does our obedience to God demonstrate love for him? Why is it such an indicator of love for God?
Yeah, I mean, what I see happening is, and this is a theme that runs all throughout 1 John, is John is giving us three tests for following Jesus. And the three tests is, they are, what do we believe? Mm-hmm. Who do we love? Yeah. And who are we following? And that shows up over and over again. And so, I mean, and you guys know this, one of the themes in 1 John is that there are people who are presenting a false Jesus, who are talking about secret knowledge that they have that other people don't have, right? They're probably early form of Gnostics, right? And so these are people who get Jesus wrong. And John's point is, you get Jesus wrong, your life goes wrong, right? And so belief is not just up here, though it is here, but it's also here, right? Yeah. And so he says, who do you believe? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, which Jesus are you truly believing in and trusting in? And then, how is that shaping your heart? Because you can't just stay here. It has to go from here, travel from here to your heart, right? To your affections. And he says, where are you at in terms of your heart? And then the proof is in the pudding, because you can say, I believe in Jesus. Yeah. I even love Jesus. Yeah. But I'm going to live like however I want to live. And that's where obedience has to follow that. Yeah. So I think it's all part and parcel of what John is getting at. It says you get Jesus right, your life goes right. Yeah. You get Jesus wrong, your life will go wrong. Mm-hmm. And that plays out in belief, in love, and in obedience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, as I think about obedience, I feel like at its core, it's really about surrender. It's like this trust.
Yeah.
Do we trust that like Jesus has like a better vision of reality than we do, and that like his commandments lead to our flourishing. Absolutely. And to life, right? Yeah. Even when it maybe doesn't seem like it, or even when it feels difficult or hard, choosing to trust that in the midst of maybe our fluctuating emotions or circumstances, I think demonstrates like to choose to trust you, even if it's like hard to believe it in the moment.
Yeah, and it's all connected to, just who this Jesus is. Like if you get Jesus right and you truly know who he is, and you truly know how much he loves you and desires for you to flourish, then how could you not follow him?
He's
right?
good. Yeah. He has our best interests at heart. Mm-hmm. As we kind of like go into the next bit of the passage, we see John talk about there's like three witnesses or three things that testify to Jesus' identity as the Son of God. He points to the Spirit, the water, and the blood. And so it can sound maybe a little bit like abstract or obscure. Like, what is he talking about? How do each of those three testify to Jesus' identity, David?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to probably turn the question on you. You probably study a bit more, but I mean, I think it does go back to the question of the identity of Jesus, and there seems to be people in the church who are stirring up problems, and they were presenting a Jesus that was not fully human.
Yeah,
that it was more of the idea of Jesus, or the Jesus that he's divine, but he doesn't die on the cross. His spirit left just before, so there's all sorts of false thinking about the person of Jesus. And I think in this passage is John reiterating just the reality of who Jesus is, the incarnation, as well as the meaning of his death on the cross.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard that theory as well, that like there was a false teaching going on that like Jesus was only the Messiah upon like his baptism, and then prior to his death, like kind of this anointing left, right? And so like when
some poor sap died on the cross, we don't even know who it was.
Just a regular man or something, right? And then when John is saying like he didn't come just by the water, but also through blood, he's pointing to Jesus was baptized, and like there you also have like the voice of the Father saying like, this is my Son with whom I'm well pleased. You have the Spirit descend, and so there's an affirmation that like of Jesus' identity there in his baptism, and then in the blood as well, right? That like through Jesus' death, like he carried that out, and the blood testifies to Jesus' sacrifice and how we are made righteous through his sacrifice, and that Jesus came in the flesh, and I think it attests to also just like his love for us, his love for us in dying, and his love in the incarnation, just by becoming like us, identifying with us. And then I think with the Spirit, it's like, okay, like the Spirit is given to draw us toward Christ, working within our hearts to really send the message that like Jesus is the Christ. And so I think you have the Spirit drawing us, and then you have these historical things that we can point to. The baptism, the blood.
So what Ryan said, it's like a leading question. Let me answer.
I thought you focused on 1 to 12 until we hit record here.
That's right.
But the last question, it'll kind of like have some themes in verses 1 to 5 and then the rest of the passage. But what hope does faith in the Son of God give us in this passage here? And how might that relate to how we overcome?
Yeah, I mean, that's what John says. And he says it 3 times. He talks about overcoming the world. Like he says it 3 times. One time he says it, though, he talks about the world has been overcome. And so that's an important distinction, because he's pointing to the fact that the work of Jesus on the cross has overcome the world. And through faith in Jesus and who he is and what he's done, we can overcome the world. And that his commandments are not, he said, are not that difficult, which is interesting. He says that. And it gives, I had an echo of scripture where Jesus says, come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, right? And he talks about my yoke being light and easy. And I had an echo of that passage. But I think our faith in Jesus and who Jesus is, that he came and who he said he was and what he did, and living in obedience and response to that, will help us overcome the world. But then the question is, well, what does that mean? And I think in the Bible, the world, what does the world mean? The world means the world is a context where you live your life independently of God.
Right.
Maybe you live your life following a different God or following different gods, or you just live your life as you are the sole reference for reality, for what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. And so the world is in the Bible, when we come across the world in this context, it's a reality where we try to live independent of God.
Right.
So in other places you come across, the world, the flesh, and the devil. I mean, but that's the meaning of the world, and so it has that specific context of independent living. And John's point is that if you really understand who Jesus is, as much as the world may try to squeeze you into its mold, you can overcome that by clinging close to Jesus. The ways of the world, in our case, the ways of the modern world, the way the ways of Netflix or TikTok, they will not have the final word over our lives, right? Wow. And that we can overcome, and it's doable. And that's why I love it. He says, this is doable. This is not burdensome. I really appreciate that.
So let me drill down on this bit, because in my mind, it's okay, when we see Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he's almost elevating the standard of what righteousness looks like. And then John is saying his commandments aren't burdensome. And yet he says who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? And so how is it that we're able to overcome even when it feels like the bar is maybe higher, or Jesus reframed what righteousness looked like?
Yeah, well, it's all throughout John's letters, the work of the Spirit. Yeah. We try to do this on our own, we are toast. Yeah, we are done, right? But it's the Spirit that empowers us and comforts us and strengthens us. Now, it still takes intentionality. It still takes effort. It's not just going to happen, especially in our world today. There's so many competing ideas. You've heard me teach on this before, but the way of the modern world is to teach us to walk in such a way, to live in such a way as if God does not exist, or if he does exist, he doesn't matter. Everything about the modern world does that. Yeah. And so, we have to be wise in this, in terms of how we spend our time and what we watch, what we take in, who we follow. We have to be very careful in this. Yeah. But it's doable. But when we keep in step with the Spirit and make the best use of the time that's been given us, I think we're on our way.
Yeah, that's it. John talks about the Spirit here as the Spirit of truth, right? And he guides us into life in the Son, just looking at verses 11 and 12 there. And so it's life is found in Jesus, and life and life to the full. Yeah. And man, when we're within God's will, it shouldn't be burdensome. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Well, thanks, David, for helping enlighten us on this passage. So have a great discussion, community groups. We hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with our community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring this knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.